Dr. Kim Hannah pressed her palm against the cold metal wall of the transport ship and tried to calm her racing heart. Through the small window, she could see orbital station Harmony growing larger as they approached. The massive structure floated in the darkness of space like a silver flower, its metal petals spinning slowly around a central hub. This was it. The moment that could change everything between humans and the galaxy's most feared predators. "First time seeing the station?" asked the pilot over the comm system. "Yes," Hannah replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "It's beautiful." "Beautiful and dangerous," the pilot said with a laugh that held no humor. "You sure you want to do this, Doc? The Velthari don't exactly have a reputation for playing nice with humans." Hannah touched the datapad in her lap. It contained 3 years of research on Velthari biology, culture, and language. 3 years of preparing for this moment when humanity would try to make peace with creatures that saw them as nothing more than walking meals. "I'm sure," she said. The transport ship docked with a soft thud that vibrated through the hull. Hannah gathered her belongings and stepped through the airlock into Station Harmony. The first thing that hit her was how quiet everything was. She had expected bustling activity, but the corridors felt almost empty. Captain Lee Do-yun was waiting for her at the docking bay. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much war. When he shook her hand, his grip was firm but brief. "Dr. Kim," he said, "welcome aboard. I wish I could say I was happy to see you, but that would mean we weren't in this mess." They walked through the station corridors as he talked. The walls were painted in soft blues and greens, colors meant to calm human nerves. But Hannah noticed the security cameras at every corner and the way the crew members they passed looked tense. "How many people are on the station?" she asked. "About 200 humans," Captain Lee said. "Diplomats, scientists, engineers, security. Everyone handpicked for this mission. In 2 days we'll have about 50 Velthari joining us." 50? Hannah felt surprised. "That seems like a lot for peace talks." "It's a small number for them," the captain said. "Their ships usually carry hundreds of warriors. This is almost an insult in their culture. Shows how little they think of us." They stopped at a large window that looked out into space. In the distance, Hannah could see other ships moving slowly between the stars. Human ships, small and quick like schools of fish, and farther away, darker shapes that moved with deadly grace. "Those are Velthari patrol ships," Captain Lee said, following her gaze. "They've been watching us since we arrived, making sure we don't try anything stupid." "What do you know about their delegation leader?" Hannah asked. The captain's face grew darker. "Kale, he's what they call a prime hunter. Think of him as their best warrior, their top killer. In the war, his unit destroyed 12 human colonies before we managed to stop them. He's responsible for the deaths of thousands of our people." Hannah felt a chill run down her spine. "And now we're supposed to make peace with him?" "The Velthari only respect strength," Captain Lee said. "They sent their most dangerous hunter because they think we're weak. They want to show us that even their diplomats could destroy us if they wanted to." They continued walking until they reached a small office near the center of the station. It had a desk, 2 chairs, and a window that showed the curved hull of the station stretching away into darkness. "This is yours," the captain said. "You're home for however long this takes. I hope you're ready for this, Dr. Kim, because if these talks fail, the war starts again. And next time, we might not survive it." After the captain left, Hannah sat at her desk and opened her datapad. She had read these files hundreds of times, but she needed to review everything again. The Velthari were not just aliens. They were nightmares given flesh. They stood 7 feet tall on average, with black scales that could turn aside most human weapons. Their hands ended in claws that could cut through metal. Their teeth were designed for tearing flesh. Their eyes could see in almost complete darkness and track movement from miles away, but it was their culture that made them truly dangerous. The Velthari live for the hunt. Their entire society was built around finding and killing dangerous prey. They had no concept of mercy or surrender. To them, the universe was divided into hunters and food. Humans, in their view, were definitely food. The war had started 3 years ago when human colonists had settled on a planet the Velthari claimed as hunting grounds. The first attack had been swift and brutal. Entire cities had been destroyed in hours. Families had been torn apart by creatures that moved like shadows and struck like lightning. Humanity had fought back with everything they had: ships, weapons, courage, and desperation. They had learned to use their smaller size and quicker thinking to outmaneuver the Velthari. But for every Velthari ship they destroyed, 2 human ships were lost. The ceasefire had come only because both sides were exhausted. The Velthari had lost more warriors than in any conflict in their history. Humans had lost entire star systems. Something had to change, or both species would destroy each other. Hannah's job was to find a way to make that change happen. She pulled up the language files on her datapad. Velthari was a complex language that relied heavily on scent and body, posture as well as sounds. It had taken her 2 years to become fluent, and she still worried about making mistakes that could be seen as insults. The basic structure of Velthari society was simple. The strongest hunters led, the weak served or died. There was no middle ground. They had no concept of equality or democracy. The idea that humans might have something valuable to offer besides. Their flesh was foreign to them, but Hannah had found something in her research that gave her hope. Deep in the oldest Velthari historical records, there were mentions of other species. Small, quick creatures that had once worked alongside Velthari hunters. The records were vague and seemed to be considered embarrassing by modern Velthari culture, but they suggested that cooperation was not completely unknown to their species. A soft chime from her door interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to see a young woman in engineering coveralls standing in the doorway. "Dr. Kim? I'm Cho Subin from engineering. Captain Lee asked me to check if your quarters are working properly." "Everything seems fine," Hannah said. "Come in." Subin entered and quickly checked the air recycling and gravity systems. As she worked, she talked nervously. "Is it true they're really coming, the Velthari?" "Yes," Hannah said. "Day after tomorrow." "I've never seen one in person," Subin said. "Only in the war footage. They're so ... She trailed off, searching for words. "Frightening?" Hannah suggested. "Alien," Subin said finally. "Like they're from a completely different universe where everything is about killing." "Maybe," Hannah said. "But they're intelligent. They have technology, art, culture. They're not just monsters." "But they eat people," Subin said quietly. Hannah couldn't argue with that. It was true. Velthari did see humans as a food source. Not their preferred food, but acceptable in certain circumstances. The idea made her stomach turn, but she had to accept it as part of their nature. "We eat animals too," she said finally. "To them, we're just another kind of animal." "But we don't hunt them for sport," Subin protested. "No," Hannah agreed. "We don't, and maybe that's something we can work with." After Subin left, Hannah returned to her files. She had 2 days to prepare for the most important conversation in human history. 2 days to figure out how to convince a species of apex predators that humanity was worth keeping alive. Outside her window, the stars wheeled slowly past. Somewhere among them was the Velthari homeworld, where creatures of tooth and claw dreamed of perfect hunts. And heading toward this small station was their greatest hunter, ready to decide the fate of 2 species. Hannah took a deep breath and got back to work. She had a war to end. The Velthari ship arrived like a shadow given form. Hannah watched from the observation deck as the massive vessel approached Station Harmony. It was black as the void between stars, shaped like a predator's tooth, all sharp angles and threatening curves. No lights showed on its hull except for thin red lines that pulsed like veins. "Elegant design," said Dr. Park Minho, standing beside her. He was a thin man with nervous hands that were currently gripping the railing too tightly. "Built for intimidation as much as function. It's working," Hannah admitted. Just looking at the ship made her feel like prey being stalked. Captain Lee's voice came over the comm system. "All personnel to stations." Velthari delegation boarding in 10 minutes. Security teams to positions. Remember, no sudden movements, no direct eye contact, and let Dr. Kim do the talking. Hannah made her way to the main docking bay. A small crowd of humans had gathered to watch the historic moment. Most looked scared, a few looked curious. Ol looked very small and fragile compared to what was coming. The airlock cycled with a hiss of pressurizing gas. Red light spilled through the opening, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps on metal. Then they emerged. The first Velthari warrior stepped through the airlock, and every human in the bay took an involuntary step backward. He was huge, easily 7.5 feet tall, covered in midnight black scales that seemed to absorb light. His head was elongated like a wolf's, filled with teeth that gleamed white against the darkness of his mouth. Golden eyes swept the room, cataloging every human present with predatory focus, but he wasn't the leader. Kale came through the airlock like death itself taking physical form. He was taller than the others, broader across the shoulders, moving with a fluid grace that spoke of perfect control over every muscle in his body. His scales were so dark they seemed to bend light around them, and his eyes were like molten gold, ancient and intelligent and utterly without mercy. When he looked at the assembled humans, his lips pulled back slightly, revealing rows of serrated teeth. It might have been meant as a smile, but it looked more like a threat. Captain Lee stepped forward, his military training helping him control his obvious fear. "Welcome to Station Harmony. I am Captain Lee Do-Yun, commanding officer of this facility." Kale's gaze swept over the captain dismissively before settling on the other humans. His nostrils flared slightly, and Hannah realized he was scenting them. Cataloging their fear, their weakness, their vulnerability. "I am Kale, Prime Hunter of the Velthari Empire," he said. His voice was deep and carried the hint of a growl. "I come to determine if your species is capable of meaningful discourse or if you remain simple prey beasts playing at intelligence." The insult was deliberate and obvious. Hannah saw Captain Lee's jaw tighten, but he maintained his composure. "Dr. Kim Hannah will be leading our diplomatic efforts," the captain said, gesturing toward her. Kale's golden eyes fixed on Hannah, and she felt like a mouse being studied by a hawk. He looked her up and down slowly, taking in her small size, her lack of natural weapons, her obvious physical weakness compared to his kind. "This?" he said, the single word dripping with contempt. "You send a tiny female to speak for your species? Do you mock us with such weakness?" Hannah stepped forward, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. She had practiced this moment hundreds of times, but facing the reality of Kale's presence was different from any simulation. He radiated danger like heat from a fire. "I am the lead xenobiologist for this mission," she said in perfect Velthari. "I speak for humanity in these negotiations." For just a moment, Kale's predatory mask slipped. His pupils dilated slightly, and his head tilted in a gesture that looked almost curious. He had not expected her to speak his language so fluently, but the moment passed quickly. "You make sounds that approximate speech," he said. "But can you comprehend the concepts behind the words? Do you understand what it means when a hunter decides whether prey lives or dies?" "I understand that you've agreed to these talks, Hannah," he replied calmly, "which means you believe there's something to be gained from negotiation rather than simple slaughter." The other Velthari shifted restlessly at her words. Speaking so directly to their prime hunter bordered on challenge, which, in their culture, usually meant death. But Kale simply stared at her with those burning gold eyes. "We shall see," he said finally. The formal negotiations began an hour later in the station's main conference room. The humans sat on one side of a long table, the Velthari on the other. The contrast was stark. The human delegation looked like children sitting across from giants made of shadow and tooth. Ambassador Yun Jiwoo had arrived on a supply ship that morning, a distinguished woman with gray hair and 3 decades of diplomatic experience. She tried to take the lead, opening with formal greetings and expressions of hope for peaceful resolution. Kale ignored her completely. His attention remained fixed on Hannah, studying her with an intensity that made everyone else in the room uncomfortable. When Ambassador Yoon asked about territorial boundaries, Kale said nothing. When she offered trade agreements, he remained silent. Only when Hannah spoke did he respond. Your species claims 12 star systems as territory, Hannah said, consulting her datapad. But your actual population only requires resources from 4. The other 8 appeared to be maintained as hunting preserves. You have studied us, Kale said. There was something like approval in his voice. Most prey species do not think beyond their immediate survival. We're not prey, Hannah said firmly. We're potential partners. Kale's laugh was like breaking glass. Partners? What could weak flesh offer to hunters? You have no claws, no fangs, no strength. You cannot track scent through vacuum or sea heat. Patterns in darkness. What user you accept as food? We built this station, Hannah said. We traveled between stars before we ever met your species. We have technology, medicine, art, philosophy. We have things you've never seen. Clever tricks? Kale dismissed. Any species can learn to use tools. It does not make them equal to their betters. The negotiations continued for hours, but it became clear that progress was impossible. Kale viewed humans as talking animals at best. The concept that they might have value beyond their meat was foreign to his thinking. As the formal session ended, Ambassador Yoon pulled Hannah aside. This isn't working, she said quietly. He won't even acknowledge our legitimacy as a species. He's testing us, Hannah said. Probing for weakness. Then we're failing the test, Ambassador Yoon replied. Because everything about us screams weakness to him. As the delegations prepared to return to their quarters, Hannah noticed something odd. Kale had remained seated at the conference table while the other Velthari filed out. He was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. She gathered her material slowly, aware of his continued attention. When she looked up, he was still watching her. You quoted our territorial boundaries precisely, he said. And our agricultural outputs. How did you acquire such detailed information? I studied, Hannah said simply. For 3 years, I've learned everything I could about your people. Why? The question seemed genuine rather than mocking. Hannah considered her answer carefully. Because I believe understanding is the first step toward peace. You see us as prey. Because you don't understand what we are. If I can show you who we really are, maybe you'll see us differently. Kale stood, his massive form towering over her. For a moment, she thought he might strike her down. Instead, he leaned closer, his golden eyes boring into hers. I have hunted across 100 worlds, he said quietly. I have faced creatures with fangs like swords and creatures with hides like armor. I have killed beasts that could crush mountains, and parasites that could devour planets. But I have never encountered prey that sought to understand its predator. Because we're not prey, Hannah said again. Kale straightened, but his gaze remained fixed on her face. We shall see, he said, echoing his earlier words. But this time, they sounded different. Less like a threat and more like ... curiosity. As he walked away, Hannah noticed that his movements had changed slightly. Still predatory, still dangerous, but somehow more controlled. As if he was thinking about something that had never occurred to him before. Dr. Park Min-ho appeared at her elbow as soon as Kale was gone. That was either very brave or very stupid, he said. Probably both, Hannah admitted. But did you see his reaction when I spoke Velthari? And the way he watched me? During the negotiations? I saw a predator studying its next meal, Park Min-ho said darkly, but Hannah wasn't so sure. There had been something else in those golden eyes. Something that looked almost like recognition, as if Kale was seeing her as something other than prey. For the first time in his life, the question was whether that recognition would lead to understanding or to something far more dangerous. Hannah first noticed something was wrong on the 3rd day after the Velthari arrival. She was walking from her quarters to her office when she felt eyes on her back. The sensation was so strong it made her skin crawl, like being watched by something that could strike at any moment. She turned around slowly, scanning the corridor behind her. It was empty except for the usual station crew going about their business. But the feeling persisted. Something was watching her. At her office, she settled. down to work on her analysis of the failed negotiations. The Velthari had rejected every proposal, dismissed every offer of cooperation, and made it clear they saw humans as nothing more than clever animals. But there had been something in Kale's behavior that nagged at her. The way he had focused on her specifically, ignoring even Ambassador Yoon's senior status. A shadow moved past her window. Hannah looked up from her datapad, but the corridor outside was empty. She waited a few minutes, then returned to her work. A few minutes later, another shadow. This time she was ready and caught a glimpse of black scales disappearing around the corner. Kale was following her. Over the next few days, the pattern became clear. Wherever Hannah went on the station, the Velthari Prime Hunter was never far behind. He didn't approach her directly or attempt to communicate. He simply watched, like a predator studying prey before making a kill. "This is highly irregular," Captain Lee said during their morning briefing. Kale is supposed to remain in the Velthari section of the station except during formal meetings. But security reports he's been spotted in human areas at least a dozen times. "What's he doing there?" Ambassador Yoon asked. "Following Dr. Kim, apparently," the captain replied, looking troubled. "My people have seen him lurking near her quarters, outside her office, even in the cafeteria when she's eating. It's like he's stalking her." Dr. Park Min-ho shifted uncomfortably in his chair. In Velthari culture, stalking behavior usually precedes a hunt. Maybe he's planning to kill her as some kind of statement. "He could have done that already if he wanted to," Hannah said quietly. "He's had plenty of opportunities." "I think this is something else." "What else could it be?" "Ambassador," Yoon demanded. "These creatures don't have emotions like we do. They don't form attachments or friendships. Everything they do is about hunting and killing." But Hannah wasn't convinced. She had spent years studying Velthari behavior, and while they were indeed apex predators, they weren't mindless killing machines. Their society was complex, their intelligence undeniable. There had to be a reason for Kale's behavior beyond simple hunting instinct. The mystery deepened when engineer Cho Subin reported something even stranger. "He's been asking questions," Subin said, looking nervous. "About you, Dr. Kim. He cornered me in the maintenance section yesterday and wanted to know about human dietary requirements, sleep patterns, environmental preferences. When I asked why, he said he was studying prey behavior, but But what?" Hannah prompted. "It didn't feel like studying prey," Subin said. "It felt like he was trying to take care of something. The questions were too specific, too concerned with comfort rather than vulnerability." That afternoon, Hannah found the first gift. She returned to her office after lunch to discover a small object sitting on her desk. It was roughly the size of her fist, made of some kind of dark crystal that seemed to absorb light. When she picked it up, it felt warm and vibrated slightly with an internal energy. "What is that thing?" Dr. Park Min-ho asked, examining the object carefully. "I'm not sure," Hannah said, "but I think it's from Kale." "How do you know?" "Because no one else could have gotten into my office without triggering security alerts, and because She paused, studying the crystal's complex faceted surface. "Because this isn't random. Someone chose this specifically." Dr. Park ran the object through every scanner they had. It was composed of materials not found in human space, arranged in patterns that seemed to serve no practical purpose. But it was beautiful, in an alien way, and completely harmless. "It's decorative," Dr. Park concluded. "Like jewelry or art, but why would a Velthari warrior give you jewelry?" The gifts continued to appear. A small sculpture made of metal that shifted color in different light. A handful of seeds from some unknown plant that smelled like cinnamon and starlight. A piece of fabric so soft it felt like touching a cloud. Each object was placed carefully on her desk when she wasn't looking. Security cameras never caught Kale entering her office, but he was the only possible source. The gifts were clearly valuable, made with skill and care that spoke of meaning beyond simple trinkets. "This is getting ridiculous," Ambassador Yoon said during their weekly briefing. "We came here to negotiate peace, not to enable some alien's strange obsession with our lead scientist." "Maybe we should ask him directly what he wants," Captain Lee suggested. Bad idea, Dr. Park said quickly. Confronting a Velthari directly about anything could be seen as a challenge, and we all know how they respond to challenges. But the situation came to a head that night when Hannah decided to work late in her office. She was deep in research on Velthari historical records when exhaustion finally overtook her. She had been pushing herself hard, trying to find some key to understanding their culture that might lead to a breakthrough in negotiations. She must have dozed off at her desk, because she woke up hours later with a stiff neck and the dim night, lighting casting long shadows across her office. As she gathered her things to return to her quarters, she heard a soft sound from behind her desk. Turning around, she discovered the most shocking sight of her life. Kale was curled up in the narrow space behind her desk, his massive form somehow compressed into an area that should have been far too small for him. His eyes were closed and his breathing was deep and regular. He was asleep. For a moment, Hannah could only stare. The galaxy's most feared predator was sleeping behind her desk like an enormous, deadly pet. His position was clearly defensive, blocking access to her workspace while keeping watch over the entire office. "What are you doing?" she whispered. Kale's eyes snapped open instantly, golden orbs focusing on her with laser intensity. But instead of leaping up or making excuses, he simply watched her calmly. "Guarding," he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Guarding what?" "This space." "Your space." His voice was quieter than she had ever heard it, lacking the usual predatory edge. "It is not safe for you to be alone." "I'm on a human station," Hannah said, "surrounded by human security. What could possibly threaten me here?" Kale unfolded himself from behind the desk with fluid grace, rising to his full impressive height, but he didn't move toward her. Instead, he remained where he was, as if reluctant to leave his protective position. "Other Velthari," he said simply. "Some do not approve of these negotiations. They see you as a potential threat to our way of life. So you're protecting me from your own people?" "Yes." The simple admission hung in the air between them. Hannah felt her understanding of the situation shift dramatically. This wasn't stalking behavior, it wasn't hunting. It was protection. "Why?" she asked. For a long moment, Kale didn't answer. He stood in the shadows of her office, this creature of tooth and claw and ancient predatory instinct, looking almost confused. "You are not prey," he said finally, repeating her own words from their first meeting. "But you are not predator either. You are something else. Something I do not have words for in my language." "What am I then?" Kale moved closer, and Hannah forced herself not to step back. Even trying to be gentle, he radiated danger like a barely contained storm. "You study us," he said. "You learn our ways, our words, our history. You seek to understand rather than to conquer or flee. This is ... He paused, searching for words. "This is not behavior I have encountered before. And that makes you want to protect me?" "Yes," the admission seemed to surprise him as much as it did her. "When I see you, my hunting instincts are quiet. Instead, there is something else. Something that says you are valuable, that you must be kept safe." Hannah felt her heart racing, but not from fear. There was something in Kale's voice, in the way he held himself, that spoke of vulnerability beneath all that predatory power. "The gifts," she said suddenly. "You've been bringing me gifts, objects of beauty from my world," Kale confirmed. "It is appropriate to offer such things to one who is valued. In your culture, what does it mean when a warrior gives gifts to someone?" Kale went very still. For a moment she thought he might not answer. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "It means the warrior has chosen to claim that individual as their own, to protect and provide for them, to ... He stopped abruptly, as if realizing what he was saying. "To court them?" Hannah finished. The silence that followed was deafening. Kale stared at her with those burning gold eyes, and she could almost see the conflict raging behind them. Everything he had been taught, everything his culture believed, was at war with whatever instinct was driving his behavior. "That is impossible," he said finally. "I am a prime hunter of the Velthari Empire. You are prey species. There can be no connection between us beyond predator and food. But there is, Hannah said softly. Isn't there? Kale's composure finally cracked. He turned away from her, his hands clenching into fists that could tear through metal. Yes, he said, the word torn from him like a confession of guilt. And I do not understand why. Dr. Park Min-ho stared at the medical readings on his screen with the expression of a man who had just discovered the laws of physics were optional. He ran the scans again, checked his equipment twice, and finally called Hannah to his medical bay. With urgency in his voice. You need to see this, he said without preamble when she arrived. I've been analyzing the security footage of Kale's behavior, combined with what we know about Velthari biology. The results are unexpected. What kind of unexpected? Hannah asked, settling into a chair across from his desk. The kind that changes everything we thought we knew about their species. Dr. Park pulled up a holographic display showing a detailed anatomical scan of Velthari physiology. Look at this brain structure here, in the hypothalamus region. See these neural clusters? Hannah studied the image. The highlighted areas were complex, more developed than she would have expected in a pure predator species. Those are pair bonding centers, Dr. Park continued. Similar to what we find in species that mate for life and form complex social relationships, but they're dormant in modern Velthari. Completely inactive. Dormant how? Like they've been suppressed through selective breeding or cultural pressure. But here's the interesting part. He brought up another scan, this one showing active neural pathways highlighted in bright blue. This is a scan I took of Kale yesterday when he was in the medical bay for routine health monitoring. Hannah's eyes widened. The pair bonding centers were lit up like fireworks, showing intense activity that shouldn't have been possible in a supposedly pure predator species. Something has triggered these dormant neural pathways, Dr. Park said. And based on his behavior patterns, I think that something is you? That's impossible, Hannah said, echoing Kale's own words from the night before. He's a warrior, a hunter. His entire culture is built around dominance and predation. His current culture, yes, Dr. Park agreed. But I did some digging into the historical records you've been studying. There are references to something called the Old Bonds in ancient Velthari texts. Partnerships between Velthari and smaller, more intelligent species that served as scouts and strategists during hunts. He brought up another display, this one showing fragments of ancient Velthari artwork. The images were crude but clear. Large, predatory creatures working alongside smaller figures that could have been members of various species. The modern Velthari government considers these records to be embarrassing myths, Dr. Park continued. Stories made up to explain why. Their ancestors didn't simply conquer everything they encountered. But what if they're not myths? What if the Velthari once formed genuine partnerships with other species? And you think Kale is reverting to these ancient instincts? I think his exposure to you has triggered genetic memories that have been buried for thousands of years, Dr. Park said. The way you refused to show submission, the way you studied his culture instead of fearing it, the way you engage with him intellectually rather than just trying to survive. It's all matching patterns that his ancestors would have recognized as pack behavior. Hannah felt a chill run down her spine. Pack behavior? The Velthari evolved from pack hunters originally before they became solitary apex predators. The ancient bonds weren't just partnerships, they were pack relationships. Mated pairs that worked together to achieve goals neither could accomplish alone. The implications hit Hannah like a physical blow. You're saying he's trying to court me because his brain thinks I'm a potential mate? I'm saying his brain has identified you as the kind of partner his species once valued above all else. Someone who enhances his abilities rather than competing with them, someone worthy of protection and care. Dr. Park's expression was serious. This isn't just attraction, Hannah. This is genetic imperative calling to genetic imperative across thousands of years of evolutionary suppression. Before Hannah could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the medical bay in red as Captain Lee's voice echoed over the comm system. All personnel to emergency stations. Velthari military vessel approaching. At high speed, this is not a drill. Hannah and Dr. Park rushed to the nearest observation deck, joining a crowd of worried humans staring out at the approaching ship. It was larger than Kale's diplomatic vessel, bristling with weapons and radiating menace even at a distance. "That's a battle cruiser," someone whispered. "What are they doing here?" Captain Lee's voice came over the come again. "Dr. Kim, Ambassador Yoon, report to the conference room immediately. We have an incoming message from the Velthari Empire." In the conference room, the main screen showed the bridge of the approaching warship. A massive Velthari warrior sat in the command chair, his scales bearing the scars of countless battles. When he spoke, his voice carried the absolute authority of high command. "I am Thrix, War Commander of the Imperial Fleet. I come to retrieve the hunter Kale, who has been contaminated by prolonged exposure to prey species. His behavior has been reported as erratic and unbecoming of a warrior of the Empire." Ambassador Yoon stepped forward. "Commander Thrix, Kale is here as part of official diplomatic negotiations. Any concerns about his conduct should be addressed through proper channels." Thrix's laugh was like the sound of breaking bones. "Diplomatic negotiations with prey beasts? The Empire has reconsidered the wisdom of these talks. We see now that exposure to your species causes unwanted side effects in our warriors." On the screen behind Thrix, other Velthari officers nodded in agreement. It was clear this wasn't just one commander's opinion. This was official Imperial policy. "Kale will return with us immediately," Thrix continued. "The negotiations are terminated. You have 6 hours to prepare for our departure." The transmission cut, leaving the humans staring at a blank screen. "We have to tell Kale," Hannah said immediately. "Tell him what?" Ambassador Yoon demanded. "That his own people think he's been compromised? That they're here to drag him home in disgrace?" "He has a right to know," Hannah insisted. She found Kale in his usual position behind her desk. But this time he wasn't sleeping. He was alert and tense, his golden eyes fixed on the approaching warship visible through her office window. "You know why they're here?" she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Kale replied. "Thrix is my former commander. He trained me, shaped me into the warrior I became. He would not come himself unless he viewed the situation as a dire threat to Imperial interests. What will happen if you go with them?" Kale was quiet for a long moment. "Re-education, memory, conditioning, possibly execution if I am deemed too far compromised." He turned to look at her directly. "They fear what I have become in your presence." "And what have you become?" "Something my people have spent millennia trying to forget." Kale stood, his massive form filling the small office space. "Dr. Park shared his medical findings with me. The neural pathways, the genetic memories, the ancient bonds. I know what is happening to me. How do you feel about it?" "Terrified," Kale admitted. "Everything I was taught, everything I believed about myself and my purpose is being rewritten by instincts I didn't know I possessed. When I see you, I do not think of hunting or conquest. I think of protection, of partnership, of building something together that neither of us could create alone." "The ancient bonds," Hannah said softly. "Yes, my ancestors worked alongside smaller, quicker species in the great hunts. Not as master and servant, but as equals with different strengths. The large provided protection and force. The small provided intelligence and strategy. Together, they were unstoppable. What happened to those partnerships?" "Fear," Kale said bitterly. "Fear that dependence on others was weakness. Fear that cooperation would make us soft. Fear that sharing power would diminish our strength. So the bonds were broken, the partnerships forbidden, the memories buried. We chose to become pure predators rather than risk being anything else. But you're remembering." "Yes, and now Thrix comes too. Ensure I forget again, permanently if necessary." Hannah felt a surge of protective anger that surprised her with its intensity. The thought of Kale being dragged away to have his memories erased or worse made her want to fight, despite knowing how useless her resistance would be against Velthari warriors. "There has to be another way," she said. Kale moved closer, close. enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his scaled skin. "There is, but it would require you to take a risk that could cost both our lives." "What kind of risk?" "In the ancient times, when bonds were challenged, the partners could invoke the right of proof, a formal demonstration that their partnership was beneficial to both species, not a weakness to be eliminated." "How does that work?" Kale's golden eyes met hers as she saw both fear and hope warring in their depths. "Ritual combat. I would fight Thrix to prove that my bond with you makes me stronger, not weaker. If I win, the bond is recognized as legitimate under the old laws. If I lose ... we both die," Hannah finished. Yes, Hannah thought about everything that had brought them to this moment. The failed negotiations, the growing understanding between their species, the possibility that cooperation might be stronger than conquest. She thought about the gifts Kale had given her, the way he protected her. The ancient neural pathways awakening after thousands of years of dormancy. "How do we invoke this right of proof?" she asked. Kale's expression showed both admiration and terror. Against every regulation in the diplomatic handbook, Hannah found herself sitting across from Kale in his quarters at 2 a.m, sharing what could only be described as the galaxy's most dangerous dinner date. The Velthari quarters were larger than human accommodations, built to house beings who needed space to move. The lighting was dimmer, tinted red to match their visual preferences. But what struck Hannah most was how Kale had arranged the space around her comfort. He had somehow acquired a human-sized chair and positioned it where she could see both the main door and the window, a protective arrangement that spoke to instincts deeper than conscious thought. "This is breaking about 15 different protocols," Hannah said, accepting a cup of something that smelled like tea but tasted like starlight. 16, Kale corrected with what might have been humor. "I counted." They had decided that if they were going to invoke an ancient bonding law, they needed to understand each other better than formal negotiations allowed, which meant spending time together as individuals rather than representatives of their species. "Tell me about the ancient partnerships," Hannah said. "The real ones, not the sanitized versions in the historical records." Kale settled into a position. That would have looked like lounging if he hadn't been able to move into attack posture in milliseconds. His golden eyes reflected the dim lighting as he spoke. "The bonds were sacred," he said. "More than marriage, more than friendship. Two beings becoming more together than they could ever be apart. The large partner provided protection, strength, physical capabilities. The small partner provided intelligence, strategy, emotional balance. Emotional balance? Veltharian are. Natural state are ... intense, all emotion at maximum levels. Rage that burns like stars, joy that could shatter mountains, grief that could swallow worlds. The small partners helped moderate these extremes, gave us perspective we couldn't achieve alone." Hannah thought about her own interactions with Kale, how his predatory intensity seemed to calm when she spoke, how her presence appeared to center him in ways she hadn't fully understood. What happened to break the bonds originally? Kale's expression darkened. Fear and politics. The empire grew powerful through conquest, but the bonded pairs were developing their own loyalties that sometimes conflicted with imperial commands. Some refused to hunt certain species, claiming their small partners had convinced them it was wrong. Others began forming mixed communities where Velthari and other species lived as equals. The Empire saw this as a threat. Yes, so they declared the bonds a form of mental contamination. They said contact with inferior species was weakening Velthari genetic purity and warrior instincts. The bonded pairs were separated by force. Many of the small partners were killed as examples. The Velthari who protested were re-educated or executed. How could an entire society just forget something so fundamental? Generations of propaganda and genetic manipulation. They bred for aggression and independence, suppressing the neural pathways that enabled bonding. Within a few centuries, most Velthari couldn't even conceive of working with other species as equals. Hannah felt a chill at the systematic nature of the cultural erasure. But the pathways still exist, Dr. Park proved that. Hidden in our DNA like sleeping dragons? Kale agreed, waiting for the right trigger to awaken them. And I'm that trigger? Kale's gaze intensified. You're not just a trigger. You're exactly what my ancestors would have recognized as an ideal bond partner. Intelligent, brave, protective of those weaker than yourself, willing to study potential enemies instead of simply fearing them. How can you know that? Because of how I feel when I'm near you. Kale's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. The constant hunger for dominance that drives every Velthari warrior simply ... stops. Instead, there's peace, contentment, the desire to build rather than destroy. Hannah felt her heart racing at the intimacy of his confession. Is that why you've been bringing me gifts? Partially. But also because you appreciate beauty for its own sake. I've watched you study the things I brought, handling them with care even though they came from someone you should fear. This is not behavior my people understand. What else don't they understand? Kale moved closer, and Hannah noticed he was being very careful to keep his movements slow and non-threatening. The way you eat. You take time to enjoy flavors rather than simply consuming fuel. The way you work, you pursue knowledge for curiosity rather than just practical advantage. The way you sleep peacefully, without the constant alertness of a creature expecting attack. You've been watching me sleep? Guarding, Kale corrected. There's a difference. I watch over you because the thought of you being harmed causes me physical pain. This is not normal for my species. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft chime from Kale's communication device. He answered it with obvious reluctance, and Hannah heard Thrix's harsh voice speaking rapid Velthari. When the conversation ended, Kale's expression was grim. He's moved up the timeline, Kale said. I'm to report to his ship in the morning for immediate departure. Then we need to make our move tonight. Hannah, you don't understand what you're risking. If this goes wrong, Thrix won't just kill us quickly. He'll make examples of us to ensure no other Velthari ever attempts to form forbidden bonds. And if we do nothing, how many chances will our species have to find peace? This might be the only opportunity to show that cooperation is possible. Kale stared at her for a long moment, and she could see the internal struggle playing out in his golden eyes. Everything his culture had taught him said this was wrong, dangerous, impossible. But everything his awakened instincts told him said it was right. There's something else you need to know, he said finally. About what invoking the right of proof really means. I'm listening. It's not just a challenge to combat, it's a formal declaration that we are bondmates. Once spoken before witnesses, it cannot be taken back. If we survive, we are considered paired for life according to the old laws. Hannah felt the weight of what he was telling her, mated. In every sense that matters to my people, you would be under my protection, and I under yours. Your enemies would become my enemies, your goals my goals. We would be bound together until death, and you would be willing to do that? To tie yourself to a human for the rest of your life? Kale's answer came without hesitation. I've been bound to you since the moment you refused to show fear in our first meeting. The formal declaration would simply make official what my heart already knows. Hannah felt something fundamental shift inside her. She had come to this station as a diplomat, hoping to prevent a war. She had never expected to find herself falling for an alien warrior who saw her as his evolutionary destiny. What about you? Kale asked quietly. Could you accept a bond with someone like me? A predator who has killed thousands of your people? Hannah looked at this massive, dangerous creature who had spent days protecting her, bringing her gifts, learning to moderate his own intensity for her comfort, who was willing to risk execution rather than abandon her to face Thrix alone. You're not the same person who killed those people, she said. You're who you were meant to be before your society forced you to become something else. The bond would change both of us, Kale warned. You would gain some of my protective instincts, my territorial nature. I would gain more of your empathy, your strategic thinking. We would become something new. Something that could help both our species find a better way forward, possibly. Or something so different that neither side would accept us. Hannah stood, up, moving to the window where she could see both human and Velthari ships floating in the darkness of space. Two species who had been trying to destroy each other, now facing a choice between continued war and unprecedented cooperation. "I've spent my whole life studying alien cultures," she said, "trying to understand how different species think and feel. But I never expected to become part of one." "You haven't answered my question." Hannah turned back to face him, this alien warrior who had somehow become the most important person in her universe. "Ask me again." Cale rose to his full impressive height, his golden eyes burning with intensity and hope and terror. "Hannah of the human species, would you accept a life bond with me? Would you stand before the assembled warriors and declare that we are stronger together than apart?" "Yes," she said without hesitation, "I would." For a moment that stretched into eternity, they simply looked at each other. Two beings from different worlds, different evolutionary paths, different ways of understanding the universe, but somehow perfect for each other in ways that transcended species boundaries. "Then we do this together," Cale said. "Whatever comes." "Together," Hannah agreed as they began planning for the most dangerous diplomatic gambit in galactic history. Neither of them noticed the small surveillance device that had been recording their conversation, or the fact that Thrix was already preparing for exactly the kind of challenge they were about to issue. The war commander had come to Station Harmony for more than just retrieving a compromised warrior. He had come to end the possibility of human Velthari cooperation once and for all, and he was very much looking forward to making an example of both the corrupted hunter and his prey species mate. The ultimatum came at dawn. Delivered with the cold precision of a military execution order. Hannah was in her office, reviewing ancient Velthari legal texts, when the emergency alert sounded. Captain Lee's voice echoed through the station with barely controlled tension. "All senior staff to the main conference room immediately. Priority Alpha, this is not a drill." In the conference room, the main screen showed Thrix's scarred face, his golden eyes burning with predatory satisfaction. Behind him, the bridge of his warship hummed with deadly efficiency. "Humans of Station Harmony," Thrix began, his voice carrying the absolute authority of Imperial command. "I bring word from the Velthari High Council regarding the contaminated warrior known as Cale." Ambassador Yoon stepped forward. "Commander Thrix, any concerns about Cale's conduct should be addressed through proper diplomatic channels." Silence. Thrix's roar cut through her words like a blade. "You dare interrupt an Imperial decree? This is precisely the kind of disrespect that proves your species' unfitness for civilized discourse." The war commander's gaze swept across the assembled humans with undisguised contempt. "The warrior Cale has been corrupted by prolonged exposure to prey species. His behavior has become erratic, his loyalty compromised, his warrior nature polluted by contact with inferior beings." "Cale has done nothing wrong," Hannah said, unable to stay silent. "He's been fulfilling his diplomatic duties. Has he?" Thrix's attention fixed on her like a targeting laser. "Has he maintained proper distance from prey species? Has he refrained from adopting their weak customs? Has he remained true to the warrior code that defines what it means to be Velthari?" The silence that followed was damning. Everyone in the room knew the answer. "I thought not." Thrix's expression showed savage satisfaction. "The contamination is worse than we feared, but the High Council is merciful. We offer Cale one chance to prove his loyalty to the Empire remains intact." Captain Lee leaned forward in his chair. "What kind of proof? Simple? Cale will execute the female who has corrupted him." Thrix's gaze locked onto Hannah. "The small human called Kim Hannah. Her death will demonstrate that he has overcome his contamination and remembers what it means to be a hunter of the Empire." The conference room erupted in shocked protests from the human delegation, but Thrix continued speaking over them. "If he refuses this simple task, he will be declared a traitor to the Empire. His name will be struck from all records, his bloodline marked as corrupted, and he will be hunted down like the prey beast he has chosen to become." "This is barbaric," Ambassador Yoon said. "You can't seriously expect—" "I expect nothing," Thrix cut her off. I offer a choice. Kale may prove his loyalty by killing the source of his contamination, or he may face the consequences of betraying everything he was sworn to protect. The transmission cut abruptly, leaving the humans staring at a blank screen in stunned silence. This changes everything, Captain Lee said finally. We can't let them force Kale to murder one of our people. But we also can't protect you from an entire Valthari battle fleet. Maybe we can negotiate, Ambassador Yoon suggested. Find some compromise that there won't be any compromise, Hana said quietly. This isn't about Kale's loyalty. This is about preventing any possibility of human Valthari cooperation. Thrix wants to eliminate both the corrupted warrior and the human who corrupted him. Dr. Park Minho, who had been silent until now, spoke up. The medical data I've gathered proves that what's happening to Kale isn't contamination. It's genetic. Awakening. His people had these bonding capabilities for millions of years before they were artificially suppressed? Try explaining that to someone who sees cooperation as weakness. Hannah replied. Before anyone could respond, the conference room doors slid open and Kale entered. His massive frame filled the doorway, and every human in the room instinctively tensed, but his golden eyes sought out Hana immediately, as she saw pain there, not predatory intent. You heard? She said. It wasn't a question. I heard. Kale's voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the rage simmering beneath the surface. Thrix has made his position clear. What will you do? Captain Lee asked. Kale moved into the room, his presence making the space feel smaller. There is an alternative to his ultimatum. An option he has not mentioned because he hopes I have forgotten it exists. What alternative? Ambassador Yin demanded. The right of proof, Kale said, looking directly at Hana. An ancient law that allows bonded pairs to defend their partnership through ritual combat. Bonded pairs? Captain Lee's voice was sharp. What bonded pairs? Hana felt every eye in the room turn to her. The moment of truth had arrived, whether she was ready or not. Kale and I have formed a bond, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. According to ancient Valthari law, we are considered life mates. The explosion of shocked voices from the human delegation was immediate and deafening. Ambassador Yoon looked like she had been struck by lightning. Captain Lee's face went through several shades of red before settling on a dangerous purple. You did what? Ambassador Yoon shrieked. Without authorization? Without consultation? Without even informing your superiors? I fell in love, Hana said simply. It wasn't exactly planned. This is a disaster, Captain Lee said. A complete diplomatic catastrophe. How are we supposed to explain this to Earth Command? Perhaps, Kale said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. You could begin by explaining that your species and mine are more compatible than anyone realized. That cooperation between us is not only possible but beneficial to both. By compatible, you mean what exactly? Dr. Park asked. I mean that Hana completes parts of my nature I didn't know were incomplete, Kale replied. And according to her behavior, I do the same for her. Together we are more effective than either of us could be alone. That's very touching, Ambassador. Yoon said acidly, but it doesn't solve our immediate problem. Thrix is demanding proof of loyalty that involves murder, which is why we invoke the right of proof, Hana said. It's a legal challenge that even the High Council cannot ignore if properly presented. Explain this right, Captain Lee ordered. Kale straightened to his full impressive height. In ancient times, when the bonds between large and small partners were honored, challenges to those bonds could be resolved through combat. If the bonded pair could prove their partnership made them stronger, the bond was legally recognized and protected. And if they couldn't prove it, both partners would be executed as examples to prevent others from attempting similar bonds. The room fell silent as the weight of what Kale was proposing sank in. You're talking about a fight to the death, Captain Lee said. Yes, Kale confirmed. I would face Thrix in single combat while Hana stands as my bondmate. If I win, our partnership is legally recognized under Imperial law. If I lose, we both die, Hana finished. This is insane, Ambassador Yoon said. We can't allow a civilian scientist to risk her life on some ancient alien ritual. With respect, Ambassador, Hannah said, this isn't your choice to make. It's mine. And mine, Kale added. The bond has been formed. The challenge has been made. All that remains is to see if we have the courage to defend what we found together. Dr. Park leaned forward in his chair. What are the actual odds of success? Unknown, Kale admitted. Thrix is older, more experienced, and has never been defeated in single combat. But he has also never faced a bonded warrior. The ancient texts suggest that the partnership enhances both participants in ways that pure aggression cannot match. Enhanced how? The large partner gains strategic thinking and emotional balance from the small partner. The small partner gains strength and battle instincts from the large partner. Together, they become something new. Hannah felt a strange, tingling sensation as Kale spoke, as if something inside her was awakening. I can feel it, she said softly. Since we declared the bond, I've been sensing things differently. Dangers I wouldn't have noticed before, tactical possibilities that never would have occurred to me. And I find myself thinking before acting, Kale said. Considering consequences beyond immediate dominance, planning strategies that involve cooperation rather than simple conquest. This is all very fascinating, Captain Lee said, but it doesn't change the fact that you're talking about gambling both your lives on an untested theory. The alternative is certain death for at least one of us, Hannah pointed out. Probably both once Thrix decides I'm too dangerous to leave alive. The conference room fell silent as everyone processed the impossible situation. Finally, Ambassador Yoon spoke. If we allow this challenge to proceed, what exactly would we be committing to? Recognition that human-Velthari partnerships are not only possible but potentially beneficial to both species, Kale said. If we succeed, it opens the door to a completely new kind of relationship between our peoples. And if you fail, we're probably looking at resumed warfare with a species that now has proof humans can corrupt their warriors, Captain Lee added grimly. The war will resume anyway if we do nothing, Hannah said. At least this way we have a chance to change everything. She looked around the room at the faces of her colleagues, her friends, her fellow humans, all of them looking at her like she had lost her mind. Maybe she had? But when she looked at Kale, when she felt the strange, new awareness that came from their bond, she knew this was. The ritual combat began at sunset, in the main cargo bay that had been hastily converted into an arena. Velthari warriors filled one side of the space, their golden eyes gleaming in the artificial lighting, while humans clustered nervously on the other. The two species had never been this close together without weapons drawn, and the tension was thick enough to cut. Thrix stood in the center of the makeshift arena, magnificent and terrifying in his battle harness. Scars crisscrossed his dark scales like medals of honor, each one a story of victory over some dangerous opponent. He moved with the fluid confidence of a predator who had never met an equal. Beside him, Kale looked smaller somehow, despite being nearly as large. The difference wasn't physical, it was psychological. Where Thrix radiated the single-minded focus of a pure killer, Kale seemed divided, part of his attention always reaching toward where Hannah stood at the edge of the arena. This is your last chance, Thrix called out, his voice carrying easily across the space. Renounce this perverse bond, execute the prey female as the law demands, and I will grant you a quick death instead of the slow agony reserved for traitors. I renounce nothing, Kale replied, his own voice steady despite the odds against him. I invoke the right of proof to defend my bondmate and the partnership we have formed. A ripple of shocked whispers ran through the assembled Velthari. Even those who had come expecting violence were surprised by the formal invocation of such ancient law. So be it, Thrix snarled. Let all witness what becomes of those who forget their nature. The combat that followed was unlike anything the humans had ever seen. It wasn't the wild brawling they might have expected, but a deadly dance of incredible speed and precision. Thrix moved like liquid shadow, his claws seeking vital points with surgical accuracy. Kale matched him move for move, but it was clear he was fighting defensively, trying to wear down his opponent rather than deliver killing blows. "He's holding back," Dr. Park whispered to Hannah. "Why isn't he fighting with full aggression?" Hannah watched the combat with growing understanding. Through their bond, she could feel what Cale was feeling, not just the physical strain of the fight, but his tactical thinking. He wasn't just trying to defeat Thrix, he was trying to prove a point. "He's demonstrating the difference," she said, softly, showing that a bonded warrior fights smarter, not just harder. As if responding to her words, Cale's strategy became clearer. Instead of meeting Thrix's attacks head-on, he began using the environment around them, turning the cargo bay's fixtures into obstacles and weapons. He fought with a three-dimensional awareness that caught Thrix off guard repeatedly, but the older warrior was experienced and adaptable. He began to counter Cale's tactical approach with pure brutality, accepting minor wounds to land devastating strikes. Blood began to flow, dark Velthari blood that steamed in the cooler air of the human station. "This isn't working, Captain," Lee said grimly. "Thrix is winning through sheer experience." Hannah felt Cale's pain through their bond, but also his determination. He was fighting not just for his life, but for the possibility of a future where their two species could work together. Instead of destroying each other, then something extraordinary happened, as Thrix pressed his advantage, driving Cale back toward the arena wall. Hannah felt an overwhelming urge to help. Not by interfering directly, that would invalidate the challenge, but by enhancing what Cale was already doing. She closed her eyes and reached out through their bond, sharing her awareness of the space around them, her understanding of Thrix's attack patterns, her human intuition about what the war commander would do next. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Cale's movements suddenly became more precise, more anticipatory. He began dodging attacks before Thrix fully committed to them, countering strikes that hadn't been thrown yet. His fighting style evolved from reactive to predictive, and for the first time in the combat, Thrix looked genuinely surprised. "Impossible," one of the Velthari warriors muttered. "He's fighting like he can read thoughts." "Not reading thoughts," Hannah said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Sharing them. This is what a true bond looks like, two minds working as one." The tide of battle shifted dramatically. Where Thrix had been dominating through superior experience, he now found himself constantly off balance, as Cale seemed to anticipate his every move. The younger warrior wasn't just fighting harder, he was fighting smarter, with insights that no single Velthari could possess, but Thrix was far from finished. Realizing that conventional tactics were failing, he switched to a berserker assault, accepting grievous wounds to land one killing blow. His claws found their mark, tearing deep gouges across Cale's chest and sending him staggering backward. The watching Velthari roared approval, expecting to see their war commander finish his opponent. But instead of pressing his advantage, Thrix paused, staring at something that made no sense to his warrior's mind. Cale was smiling. "Do you feel that?" Cale asked, his voice carrying clearly despite his wounds. "The rage rising in your chest? The need to prove dominance through pain?" "I feel victory," Thrix snarled, but there was uncertainty in his voice. "You feel loneliness," Cale corrected. "The emptiness that comes from fighting alone, with no one to share the burden of leadership, no one to offer counsel or comfort. I used to feel it too until I found something better." As he spoke, Hannah felt their bond deepening, strengthening. She could sense Cale's pain, but also his absolute certainty that what they had found together was worth any sacrifice. "This is what you fear," Cale continued, his voice growing stronger despite his injuries. "Not that I have grown weak, but that I have grown beyond the limitations you cling to. You fear that other warriors will see what I have found and want it for themselves." "Lies!" Thrix roared, launching himself forward in a final desperate attack, but the attack never landed. Cale moved with impossible precision, guided by Hannah's strategic insights and powered by the strength that came from having something worth protecting. His claws found the gap in Thrix's guard, striking with surgical accuracy at pressure points that would disable without killing. Thrix collapsed, paralyzed but alive, his golden eyes wide with shock and something that might have been recognition. "The combat is finished," Cale announced, breathing heavily but standing victorious. The right of proof has been satisfied. Our bond is legally recognized under the ancient laws. For a moment, the cargo bay was completely silent. Then, one by one, other Valthari warriors began to step forward. Not to challenge the result, but to study Kale and Hana with new interest. I felt it too, one of them said quietly. During the final exchange, when his fighting style changed, there was something more there, something we have lost. The old stories, another warrior murmured. The ancient partnerships our grandparents whispered about, they were real. Ambassador. Yoon stepped forward, seizing the diplomatic opportunity. What you witnessed here tonight is just the beginning. Dr. Kim's research has proven that humans and Valthari are naturally compatible partners. Your own ancient texts speak of such bonds before they were forbidden by imperial decree. The assembled Valthari exchanged glances, and Hana could see the conflict in their expressions. Centuries of conditioning told them that cooperation was weakness, but they had just witnessed proof that partnership could enhance rather than diminish a warrior's capabilities. The neural pathways still exist in all of you, Dr. Park called out, stepping forward with his medical scanner. The capacity for bonding was never truly removed, only suppressed. What happened to Kale could happen to any Valthari who found the right partner. A younger warrior moved closer to the fallen Thrix, studying his paralyzed form. War, Commander, you felt it too, didn't you? The moment when Kale became more than just another opponent? Thrix's eyes burned with rage and something that might have been fear. Contamination, he whispered. Weakness disguised as strength. No, Kale said, moving to stand over his former commander. Evolution. The strength our ancestors knew before the Empire decided fear was easier than growth. Engineer Cho Subin, who had been working quietly in the background throughout the crisis, suddenly stepped forward. If I may, she said nervously, addressing the room. I've been collaborating with some of your technical specialists over the past few days. Valthari sensory abilities combined with human engineering techniques have solved problems neither of us could handle alone. She gestured to a small group of Valthari who had been helping with station maintenance. These warriors discovered structural flaws in our hull that our instruments missed entirely. In return, our manufacturing techniques allowed them to create repairs stronger than anything in their standard toolkit. Practical cooperation, one of the Valthari engineers said. Not dominance, not submission, partnership. Captain Lee looked stunned. You've been working together? When did this start? 3 days ago, Subin admitted. When the first Valthari delegation arrived, some of them were curious about our technology. I thought if we're going to be sharing a station, we might as well help each other. And it worked? Ambassador Yoon asked. Better than worked, Subin said, gaining confidence. We accomplished in 3 days what would have taken us 3 weeks alone. They have capabilities we lack, and we have techniques they've never seen. Together, the attack came exactly 7 days later. Just as Kale had predicted, Hannah was in the engineering section, working alongside a mixed team of humans and Valthari to upgrade the station's defensive systems, when the proximity alarms began screaming. Through the viewport, she could see them emerging from hyperspace like sharks smelling blood. 3 Imperial dreadnoughts, each one capable of destroying the station 10 times over. Battle stations, Captain Lee's voice echoed through the corridors. All personnel to emergency positions. This is not a drill, but something was different this time. Instead of humans scrambling to one set of positions while Valthari took another, the mixed teams continued working together with practiced efficiency. Over the past week, they had learned to function as integrated units, and that coordination showed now when it mattered most. Incoming transmission, came the report. From the communications center. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the lead Imperial ship. The figure in the command chair made Thrix look like a gentle diplomat by comparison. Supreme War Master Vex was ancient even by Valthari standards, his scales bearing scars from 1,000 battles across the galaxy. When he spoke, his voice carried the absolute authority of someone who had never been denied anything he wanted. Station harmony, Vex said, the words dripping with contempt. You harbor traitors and prey beasts who have corrupted our warriors. Surrender the contaminated individuals immediately, or face the consequences of defying the Empire. Ambassador Yun stepped forward, her diplomatic training helping her maintain composure despite the obvious hopelessness of their situation. Supreme War Master, we are prepared to discuss. There will be no discussion, Vex cut her off. You will surrender the corrupted warrior Kale and the prey female who contaminated him within 1 standard hour. After that, we will take them by force, and any who resist will be destroyed as accomplices to treason. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in grim silence. Options? Captain Lee asked. Limited, his tactical officer reported. Our weapons might scratch their paint if we're lucky. Their shields could absorb everything we can throw at them and still have power left over to destroy us. We could try evacuating the civilian personnel, someone suggested. Where? Kale asked, having arrived in the command center with several other Valthari. Their ships are faster than our transports. No one would escape. Dr. Park looked up from his medical scanner, his face showing a mixture of fear and excitement. There might be another option, he said. The bonding process, it's not limited to pairs. According to the historical records Hannah found, entire communities could form cooperative networks. Meaning what exactly? Captain Lee demanded. Meaning that if enough humans and Valthari form temporary working bonds, we might be able to coordinate our defenses in ways the Empire can't predict or counter. Supreme War Master Vex expected to face either cowering humans or isolated Valthari rebels. He didn't expect to encounter something that hadn't existed for thousands of years, a true cooperative network of multiple species, working in perfect harmony. The first surprise came when the station's defensive systems came online. Instead of the standard human technological approach or traditional Valthari tactics, the defenses showed a hybrid strategy that combined the best of both civilizations. Human precision-guided Valthari instincts. Valthari-enhanced senses provided. Targeting data for human weapon systems. Impossible, Vex muttered, watching his initial probing attacks being countered with impossible efficiency. How are they coordinating so precisely? On the station, the answer was becoming clear to everyone. Involved, the working partnerships that had developed over the past week were evolving into something unprecedented. Not full life bonds like Hana and Kale shared, but temporary cooperative links that allowed teams to function with superhuman or super Valthari. Effectiveness. Engineer Subin found herself able to sense structural stress patterns through her Valthari partner's enhanced awareness. Dr. Park discovered he could diagnose injuries with incredible precision by sharing his Valthari colleagues' sensitivity to biological systems. Captain Lee and his Valthari tactical advisor began anticipating enemy movements with an accuracy that bordered on precognition. This is what our ancestors achieved, Kale told the assembled defenders. Not just individual bonds, but entire communities working as integrated networks. The Empire destroyed this capability because they feared what we might become if we remembered how to truly cooperate. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. 3 Imperial dreadnoughts, representing the pinnacle of Valthari military might, found themselves stalemated by a single space station defended by creatures they considered inferior prey. Every attack was anticipated, every weakness exploited, every advantage turned against them through the seamless cooperation of species that had been trying to destroy each other just weeks before. But the defenders of Station Harmony weren't just fighting defensively. Working together, they had managed to reverse-engineer Valthari shield technology and integrate it with human energy systems, creating defensive barriers stronger than anything either species could produce alone. Report? Vex demanded as his ships failed to make progress against what should have been an easy target. Sir, they're using tactics we've never encountered, his tactical officer reported. It's like they know what we're going to do before we do it. Impossible. No prey species has such capabilities. With respect, War Master, these aren't just prey species anymore. And they're not fighting alone? Through the viewport of his flagship, Vex could see the truth his officer was trying to convey. Velthari warriors were working alongside human defenders. Their movements perfectly coordinated, their strategies seamlessly integrated. It was everything the Empire had spent centuries trying to prevent. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender offers from several of our own warriors aboard the station." "Surrender offers? Not surrender to the enemy, sir. Requests to join them. They're claiming they've discovered what our ancestors knew before the Great Purge." Vex felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature on his bridge. The Great Purge was ancient history, the time when the Empire had systematically eliminated the bonding capabilities from Velthari society. It wasn't supposed to be possible for those abilities to return. "Jam all communications," he ordered. "No one speaks." To the traitors. But it was too late. The word was already spreading through his fleet. Curious Velthari were scanning the station, trying to understand what was happening there. And what they saw challenged everything they had been taught about strength and cooperation. "War Master," his chief science officer said quietly, "I'm detecting unusual neural activity among our crew. Exposure to the coordinated defenders is triggering responses in brain regions that are supposed to be dormant." "What kind of responses?" "The kind that suggest our warriors are remembering capabilities they didn't know they possessed." As the battle continued, more and more Velthari aboard the Imperial ships began questioning why they were fighting. The defenders of Station Harmony weren't showing weakness through cooperation. They were demonstrating strength beyond anything the Empire could achieve through dominance alone. The turning point came when a group of younger Velthari warriors, aboard Vex's own flagship, requested permission to join the defense of the station. "You want to betray the Empire?" Vex snarled. "We want to discover what we really are," their spokesman replied. "Not what the Empire has forced us to become, but what our ancestors intended us to be. Traitors." "Evolutionaries," the warrior corrected. "We've seen what's possible when we work with others instead of simply dominating them. We want to be part of that future." The mutiny spread rapidly through all three ships. Not a violent overthrow, but a quiet revolution as more and more Velthari decided they preferred cooperation to conquest. Within hours, Supreme War Master Vex found himself commanding ships with crews that no longer believed in the mission they had been sent to complete. The final moment came when Vex himself, ancient and proud and utterly convinced of his own superiority, found himself standing alone on his bridge while his entire crew worked to establish communication with the station. "You have all been contaminated," he said, his voice filled with the rage of someone watching his entire worldview collapse. "The Empire will not tolerate this perversion." "Then the Empire will have to evolve or die," Kale's voice came through. "The communication system. Because what we found here is spreading faster than fear can contain it." Ambassador Yoon stepped into the transmission, flanked by both humans and Velthari. "Supreme War Master, we invite you to join us. See for yourself what cooperation can accomplish. Experience what your own ancestors once knew. Never." But even as Vex rejected the offer, Hana could see the conflict in his ancient eyes. He had spent his entire life believing that strength came from dominance, that cooperation was weakness, that his people were naturally superior to all others. Now he was being shown proof that everything he believed was wrong. The siege of Station Harmony ended not with destruction, but with transformation. 3 Imperial dreadnoughts became the nucleus of the first mixed-species fleet in galactic history. Humans and Velthari working together,